He laughed that afternoon, standing in his designer suit beside a broken-down car, mocking the grease-stained mechanic who had been trying to help him. "You'll never understand success," the rich man sneered, his voice dripping with arrogance. The mechanic said nothing, just wiped his hands on a rag and watched the luxury car roar away. To the crowd that had gathered, it was just another scene of pride and humiliation. But for the man covered in oil and silence, it was a moment he would never forget. Weeks passed, and life, as it often does, shifted the balance. The same rich man found himself stranded again, this time on a deserted road outside the city. Rain poured relentlessly, lightning slicing across the sky, and his car, once a symbol of power, now sat lifeless under the storm. He called for help, but no one came. His phone died, his confidence followed, and for the first time in years, he felt the sting of helplessness. Then, through the thunder, a new sound emerged, the deep, rolling growl of motorcycle engines. At first, he felt fear. A group of Hell's Angels pulled up beside him, their jackets soaked, their faces unreadable beneath helmets and tattoos. The leader stepped forward, glancing at the man's expensive car, then at the man himself. Without a word, he opened the hood, inspected the damage, and signaled to his crew. Within minutes, the bikers were working in silence, their tools clicking rhythmically against metal. The rich man stood motionless, drenched in rain, unsure what to say. Every drop of water felt like a drop of shame. He recognized one of them, the same mechanic he had humiliated weeks before. The man didn't look at him with anger, only quiet resolve. They worked together until the engine roared back to life. And just as quickly as they had come, the bikers closed the hood, climbed on their motorcycles, and rode away into the storm. No words, no payment, no revenge, just a lesson delivered with silence and steel. As the roar of their engines faded into the distance, the rich man stood alone, drenched and trembling, not from the cold, but from realization. In that rain-soaked moment, he understood something that all his money had never taught him. Respect isn't bought, and kindness doesn't need an audience. It only needs a heart strong enough to do what's right, even when no one's watching. When the bikers disappeared into the rain, the rich man stood there for several minutes, watching the faint red glow of their taillights vanish down the dark road. The sound of thunder faded, leaving only the soft hum of his car engine and the weight of silence. He wanted to call out, to say something, anything, but pride held his tongue hostage. That silence, however, was louder than any insult he had ever spoken. For the first time, he was left alone with his own reflection, staring at the man he had become. As he drove back to the city, the rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers seemed to echo the same question in his mind. Why did they help me? These were men he had judged, mocked, and dismissed as beneath him. Yet when he was stranded, they had shown up, not to mock him in return, not to take revenge, but to help. That realization unsettled him in ways he couldn't explain. Power, wealth, and status, all the things he had built his identity upon, suddenly felt hollow. The following morning, he couldn't shake the image of the mechanic's face from his mind. He remembered those calm eyes, the quiet dignity in the way the man had looked at him after being humiliated. It wasn't anger. It was something else, something stronger. It was grace, the kind of strength that doesn't need to prove itself. The rich man sat at his breakfast table, untouched food before him, and for the first time, he realized he didn't feel superior. He felt small. That week, he found himself driving to the edge of town, toward the mechanic's workshop. The small garage stood exactly as he remembered. Dusty, old, yet alive with the smell of oil and work. He parked his luxury car outside, but didn't step in immediately. Part of him feared rejection. Another part feared what he might have to face within himself. But as he stood there, the mechanic walked out, wiping his hands as if he had been expecting him all along. "I came to thank you," the rich man said, his voice awkward, uncertain. The mechanic nodded slowly, saying nothing. "You didn't have to help me," the man continued. "Not after what I said." The mechanic looked him in the eye and replied, "You're right. I didn't. But if I only helped the people who deserved it, I wouldn't be helping anyone at all." Those words hit the rich man harder than the storm ever had. The two men stood there for a moment, the hum of engines and distant music filling the space between them. The rich man lowered his gaze, unable to hold the mechanic's eyes. For the first time, he wasn't just embarrassed. He was humbled. The mechanic gestured toward the workshop. "Come in," he said simply. Inside, tools were scattered across tables. A radio played softly in the corner, and a half-fixed bike sat in the center like a work of art. The rich man looked around, realizing that this simple space carried more authenticity than his entire mansion ever had. As they talked, the mechanic shared pieces of his story. He had once been part of the Hells Angels, men bound not by money or appearance, but by loyalty, respect, and brotherhood. "We've seen the worst in people," he said, tightening a bolt on an engine. "But that's why we try to be the best we can, even when no one believes we are." The rich man listened, every word breaking down the wall of arrogance he had built over the years. He began to understand that real wealth wasn't in what you owned. It was in who you were when no one was watching. Over the next few days, the rich man kept returning. He didn't know exactly why. Perhaps to learn, perhaps to atone. Sometimes he brought lunch, sometimes he just listened. He discovered that the bikers weren't the violent outlaws he had once imagined. They were veterans, workers, fathers, men who had made mistakes but found redemption in unity and discipline. Each one carried a story that could shatter stereotypes in a heartbeat. One afternoon, as they worked together on a motorcycle, the mechanic looked at him and said, "You know, engines and people aren't that different. You take care of them, they'll run. You neglect them, they'll fall apart. But with patience and the right hands, even the broken ones can run again." The metaphor hit home. The rich man realized he wasn't there to fix a machine. He was there to fix himself. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the engines cooled, the rich man offered to pay for all the help he had received. The mechanic shook his head. "We don't fix things for money," he said. "We fix them because we remember what it felt like when no one stopped to help us." The man drove home that night with his mind quiet, his heart heavy, but for the first time, he understood what true respect looked like. Days turned into weeks, and the friendship between the two men grew quietly. The rich man began showing up earlier each morning, trading his expensive watch for a pair of work gloves. At first, he was clumsy, dropping tools, over-tightening bolts, but he didn't give up. The mechanic never laughed at his mistakes. Instead, he guided him with the same patience he gave to every broken engine. "You don't fix things by force," he'd say. "You fix them by listening." Those words began to echo in the rich man's mind long after he left the garage. As they worked side by side, the mechanic's brothers, the other bikers, began to stop by. At first, they were wary of the rich man, remembering how he had once mocked one of their own. But slowly they saw change in him. He listened more than he spoke. He respected their time, their stories, their silence. One afternoon, after hours of sweating over a stubborn carburetor, one of the bikers clapped him on the shoulder and said, "Guess you're not as soft as you look." The garage erupted in laughter, and for the first time in years, the rich man laughed too. Not politely, not for show, but honestly. Over dinner that night, the bikers shared their stories. Some had lost everything: family, homes, freedom. Yet here they were, rebuilding their lives with grease-stained hands and open hearts. The rich man listened in awe. He realized that while he had spent his life building wealth, these men had been building character. They had traded luxury for loyalty, arrogance for brotherhood, and somehow ended up richer than he'd ever been. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, the mechanic asked him, "Why do you keep coming back?" The rich man paused, then said quietly, "Because this is the first place I've ever felt real." The mechanic nodded, as if he already knew the answer. "That's what happens when you take off the mask," he said. "Life's heavier without it, but it's real." Those words settled deep in the man's heart, like truth finally finding its home. That night, as he drove home, the world outside seemed different. The same streets he used to see as proof of his success now looked smaller, emptier. He didn't need applause anymore. He needed meaning. And somewhere between the hum of the car engine and the memory of those roaring motorcycles, he began to understand that humility wasn't losing power. It was gaining peace. A month later, a charity event was announced in the city, an expensive gala to raise money for homeless veterans. The rich man had attended dozens of such events before, but this time he saw it differently. Instead of writing a large check to impress the crowd, he made another choice. He invited the mechanic and the bikers to come with him as his guests. When they arrived, the room went silent. The sight of leather jackets and tattoos among tuxedos and gowns was enough to turn heads and raise eyebrows. Whispers spread like wildfire, but the rich man didn't flinch. He walked beside his new friends with quiet pride. As the speeches began, one of the hosts joked on stage about unusual company, drawing forced laughter from the audience. But before the moment could turn cruel, the rich man stood. "These men," he said, his voice calm but firm, "taught me more about dignity and humanity than any boardroom ever did. You call them outlaws. I call them brothers." The room fell into silence. The bikers didn't need to speak. Their presence said it all. After that night, the donations doubled. People approached them, curious, humbled, even inspired. Some of the richest men in the room, who had never worked a day with their hands, found themselves shaking hands with the men they'd once judged. The mechanic only smiled, his weathered face calm. He didn't seek validation. He knew true worth didn't need an audience. Later, as they left the gala, one of the bikers chuckled. "You sure you belong in there, rich man?" The man grinned. "No," he said. "I belong here with you." For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like he was trying to fit in. He felt like he had found where he truly belonged. That night, they rode together out of the city, the engines roaring beneath the stars. The wind whipped against their faces, but none of them spoke. They didn't need to, because in that moment, on that open road, the rich man finally understood what freedom really meant. It wasn't about what you owned. It was about who you rode beside when the road turned rough. As summer settled in, the rich man's life looked nothing like before. His days no longer revolve around meetings or markets, but around the garage, helping with repairs, sharing meals, and riding with the brothers on long, quiet stretches of highway. The mansion he once flaunted now felt like an echoing shell of who he used to be. He spent more time under the sun, hands rough, shirt soaked in sweat, but heart lighter than ever. It wasn't wealth he was building now, it was worth. One afternoon, Iron Dave, the mechanic, asked him to join a community project. A local school needed repairs, and the bikers were volunteering to fix it for free. The rich man hesitated at first. He wasn't used to giving without recognition, but he went anyway. Together, they patched walls, fixed wiring, and replaced broken windows. Children watched from the gates, waving and laughing. Their gratitude wasn't loud, but it was genuine. It filled a space inside him that money never could. When the project ended, the school principal pulled him aside. "I never expected to see a man like you here," she said kindly. He smiled faintly and replied, "Neither did I." Her words stayed with him for days. For years, he had lived behind tinted windows and closed gates, building walls that separated him from everyone else. But with every nail he hammered, those walls inside him were crumbling too. The bikers began calling him Chrome for his shiny car and polished past, a nickname that started as a joke but grew into a badge of acceptance. One night around the fire, they handed him a leather vest with the word Prospect sewn on the back. It wasn't just a gesture. It was a test of trust, loyalty, and humility. He held it in his hands for a long moment before slipping it on. It fit awkwardly, but it felt right. As the fire crackled and the engines cooled beside them, Iron Dave raised a bottle and said, "You know what's funny, Chrome? We fixed your car that night because you were stranded. But maybe you were stranded long before that, and didn't even know it." The group laughed softly, but the rich man couldn't, because deep down, he knew it was true. Autumn arrived, painting the roads in gold and rust. The biker crew planned a charity ride across 3 towns to raise funds for struggling mechanics and veterans. Chrome joined them, nervous but determined. Riding in formation was unlike anything he had ever experienced. The synchronized rumble of engines, the rush of wind, the unity of movement. For the first time, he felt small in the best way possible, a part of something far greater than himself. At one stop, a young man approached him timidly. "You're the guy from the story, right?" he asked. "The one who mocked the mechanic." Chrome froze, caught off guard. He nodded slowly. The young man smiled faintly. "I just wanted to say, I showed your story to my dad. He's been struggling to get back on his feet. It gave him hope. Chrome's throat tightened. Words caught somewhere between shame and gratitude. He didn't know it, but his redemption had already begun to ripple outward. By the third town, the ride had become a spectacle. People cheering, children waving flags, cameras flashing. But Chrome didn't care for the attention. All he cared about was the look in the eyes of those who saw the crew, not as rebels, but as protectors. The Hells Angels had rebuilt their reputation one good deed at a time, and now, so had he. Their engines no longer thundered in defiance. They roared with purpose. When they returned home, exhausted and covered in dust, Chrome approached Iron Dave and said, "You were right. I was stranded, but now, I think I found my road." Dave smiled, handed him a wrench, and said, "Good. Now help me fix this one last thing." The two men laughed, side by side, the sound of friendship louder than the hum of the engines around them. That night, as the sun melted into the horizon, the bikers rode again. No destination, no goal, just freedom. Chrome's vest fluttered in the wind, his once polished hands gripping the handlebars with strength and certainty. The man who had mocked humility now carried it proudly on his back. And for the first time in his life, the silence inside him felt full. Winter crept in quietly, painting the horizon with frost and stillness. The town grew colder, the roads emptier, but the Brotherhood never stopped riding. Chrome rode at the back now, not because he was new, but because he liked to watch the unity of the riders, the thunder that rolled through their formation, the proof that broken men could create something strong enough to shake the ground. Every ride felt sacred, a reminder that redemption wasn't about erasing the past, but learning to steer through it. One night, as snowflakes fell under the glow of the gas station lights, Iron Dave sat beside Chrome, sipping coffee from a cracked mug. "You've changed," Dave said softly, without looking at him. Chrome smiled. "No," he replied. "I think I just stopped pretending." They sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that feels like understanding rather than emptiness. The engines outside clicked softly as they cooled, like metal hearts still beating after a long day. Later that night, Chrome returned to his mansion for the first time in months. He walked through its empty halls, the echo of his footsteps louder than ever. The walls were lined with expensive art, but none of it meant anything anymore. He realized he had built a palace around himself to feel powerful, but all it had done was make him lonely. He picked up an old photo of himself from years ago, smiling, arrogant, hollow, and whispered, "You were rich, but you were starving." Then, quietly, he left the mansion's lights off and closed the door behind him for good. The next morning, he arrived at the garage early, carrying boxes of tools and supplies. "These are for the kids," he said, handing them to Dave. "You've been talking about starting an apprenticeship program, right?" Dave raised an eyebrow. "And how do you know that?" Chrome smiled. "Because I listen now." That small gesture sealed something unspoken between them, a bond deeper than forgiveness. By the end of the day, a group of teenagers filled the workshop, their eyes wide with curiosity as they learned from the bikers. The sound of laughter and clinking tools replaced the roar of engines. Chrome stood back and watched. For once, he wasn't the center of attention, and that, he realized, was the greatest piece of all. Spring came again, and with it, the road. The crew planned a cross-country ride to deliver bikes and tools to struggling workshops across several towns. Chrome joined them eagerly, his leather vest now worn, the word prospect faded but proud. The wind whipped through his hair as they rode across miles of open land, mountains, valleys, endless stretches of highway. Every turn felt like another mile away from who he used to be. During one stop, they visited a small-town diner where locals stared at them with a mix of fear and curiosity. But when one of the bikers helped an elderly couple change a flat tire outside, the atmosphere shifted. Laughter replaced suspicion, kindness replaced fear. The same scene replayed in every town they passed through. The world was learning, slowly, that the loudest people weren't always the cruelest, and the quietest weren't always weak. As the miles rolled on, Chrome began to feel something powerful, a sense that this journey wasn't just about them. It was about everyone watching, everyone listening. The mechanic who forgave him had unknowingly sparked a wave of humanity across people who had forgotten what grace looked like. They weren't just riding bikes anymore. They were carrying a message. That compassion could be loud. That mercy could roar like thunder. One evening, after hundreds of miles, they stopped on a cliff overlooking the ocean. The sunset bled gold across the waves, and the sound of the wind was soft against the growl of their bikes. Iron Dave looked over at Chrome and said, "You know, brother, we don't fix cars or bikes. We fix people. And sometimes, the hardest person to fix is the one staring back at you." Chrome nodded, his eyes glassy with emotion. "You fix me," he said quietly. Dave smiled. "No, you fixed yourself. We just gave you a reason to try." That night, as the group rode beneath the stars, the roar of engines blended with the sound of the ocean below. Chrome didn't need mirrors anymore. He didn't need to look back. Every mile ahead was a promise. Every breath proof that even the proudest man could fall, break, and still rise again. Because sometimes, redemption doesn't arrive with a sermon. It arrives on two wheels, wrapped in leather, and carried by the sound of thunder. The next few months passed like pages in a book he never wanted to end. The Biker Brotherhood had grown, the youth apprenticeship program was thriving, and Chrome, once the man who had looked down on others, was now a teacher, a mentor, and a friend. People in town no longer whispered when he walked by. They nodded, smiled, and waved. Redemption had turned into respect. Yet, deep down, Chrome knew that his greatest debt was not one he could repay with words or actions. It was one of gratitude. One afternoon, while helping a young apprentice repair a carburetor, Chrome noticed a small scratch on the boy's wrist, fresh, deep, and deliberate. The laughter around him faded as his heart tightened. He recognized that pain instantly. It was the same kind he used to hide behind his arrogance, the pain of not feeling enough. Without saying much, he took the boy aside and told him his story. Not the polished version, but the truth. He told him about pride, failure, and the day a gang of bikers saved his soul. The boy's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, Chrome understood that healing wasn't just about fixing yourself. It was about helping someone else rise too. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat outside the garage, staring at the stars, replaying the day in his mind. The boy's trembling voice echoed in his head. "Do you really think people can change?" He had answered, "They already have. You just haven't seen it yet." Now, alone under the night sky, he whispered that same truth to himself. Change wasn't a miracle. It was a choice you made, every single day, even when no one was watching. The next morning, he arrived at the garage before sunrise. Iron Dave was already there, as always, brewing black coffee. Chrome sat beside him and said, "You were right, brother. You don't fix people. You remind them they can fix themselves." Dave smiled faintly, taking a slow sip before replying, "That's all we ever do." It was a quiet exchange, but it carried the weight of everything they'd built together: respect, redemption, and the kind of bond that only scars could forge. Later that week, the bikers gathered for a ride. This time not for charity, but for something deeper. They rode to a cliff overlooking the ocean, the same place where Chrome had first learned what freedom felt like. There, beneath the setting sun, they removed their helmets and stood in silence. Not for loss, not for pain, but for gratitude. For every road that had led them here, and every storm that had made them stronger. As years passed, Chrome's hair turned gray, his hands grew rougher, but his heart stayed steady. The garage had become a beacon of hope for those society had forgotten: runaways, ex-cons, veterans, and lost souls who arrived broken and left reborn. His mansion had long been sold, and the money used to build community programs and shelters. The man who once flaunted his wealth now wore simplicity like a crown. On the anniversary of the night the bikers first helped him, Chrome decided to visit that same road. The one where his car had broken down, where rain had fallen, and where mercy had changed everything. The road was quiet now, overgrown with weeds, but the memory still pulsed in the air. He parked his bike, walked to the same spot, and whispered, "Thank you." The wind carried his words away, but in his heart, he knew they had reached the men who had taught him what life was really about. When he returned to the garage, a surprise awaited him. The bikers had gathered, smiling, holding a new vest. Across the back, where Prospect had once been, a single word was now stitched in bold letters: "Brother." Chrome froze, tears glinting in his eyes. He had chased power his entire life, but this moment, this simple word, was more valuable than everything he had ever owned. That evening, they rode together again, their formation tight, their engines singing against the twilight sky. Chrome rode beside Iron Dave, who nodded toward him with a knowing smile. "Full circle," Dave said. Chrome grinned. "No," he replied softly. "Just the next chapter." The wind swallowed their words as the road stretched endlessly ahead. As night fell, the roar of their motorcycles faded into the distance, an anthem of redemption echoing across the land. And somewhere, in the hearts of those who heard their story, a quiet realization settled in. No man is too broken to rebuild, no mistake too heavy to carry, and no act of kindness too small to change the course of a life. When the engines finally fell silent, and the night wrapped itself around the open road, the story of Chrome and the Hells Angels remained, not as a tale of men and machines, but as a testament to what redemption truly means. A man who once mocked humility had been saved by it. A heart that once worshipped wealth had learned to measure value by compassion. The road that had once led him to loneliness had brought him back to life. Sometimes, life doesn't punish to destroy, it humbles to rebuild. What makes this story unforgettable is not the roar of the motorcycles, nor the glint of chrome under sunlight. It's the silence of forgiveness. The kind that asks for nothing, demands nothing, but changes everything. Those men didn't save him for glory. They saved him because they understood something most people never do, that helping someone rise never makes you fall. And in that truth lies the raw beauty of humanity, the power to lift without judgment, to give without reason. The garage, once filled with broken engines, became a sanctuary for broken souls. It stood as proof that mercy, not money, is the real currency of life. People came not just to fix machines, but to fix themselves. Every wrench turned, every engine revived, carried the same unspoken message. It's never too late to start over, and no man is too far gone to find his way back home. As the years passed, Chrome's name became less of a memory and more of a message. His story whispered through towns, across highways, and into hearts. The reminder that even the proudest man can bend, and even the fallen can stand tall again. Because in the end, it's not about where you've been, it's about what you choose to build after the fall. And those who have walked through fire often become the very light others need to find their way. If this story touched you, let its message ride further. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your words might be the spark someone else needs to keep going. And if you believe in stories that remind us what humanity still looks like, stay close. Subscribe, like, and join us here, where every story proves one truth. Even in a world of noise, kindness still roars louder than anything else on the road.